Long before Central Park became one of the most famous parks in the world, this part of Manhattan was a rugged landscape of exposed granite, thin soil, wild grasses, scattered trees, and small patches of woodland. Narrow dirt paths wound between rocks and brush, while a few farms and simple cottages stood quietly in the distance. Farmers worked the land, horses moved along rough trails, and smoke rose gently from small chimneys. The city was still far away, and the landscape felt more like countryside than the heart of a future metropolis. As Manhattan expanded northward, settlement slowly became more visible. Fences stretched across the fields, gardens grew around modest homes, and dirt lanes connected a small community known as Seneca Village. Families worked, children played, and horses moved between the houses. Yet beneath this growing settlement, the rugged character of the land remained. Then surveyors arrived, marking the terrain and measuring the ground. Gradually, the farms and homes disappeared, clearing the way for an enormous transformation. Construction reshaped everything. Workers cut trees, broke apart rock, moved earth, and carved new contours into the landscape. Horse-drawn wagons carried soil and stone, while laborers dug broad basins and created carefully planned paths. Natural depressions became lakes, rough ground became lawns, and young trees were planted in deliberate patterns. Stone bridges began rising above streams and pathways. What had once been wild and uneven was slowly becoming a vast, designed landscape. Central Park began to take its recognizable form. Young trees grew beside winding paths. Broad lawns opened between clusters of vegetation, and visitors began filling the walkways. Horse-drawn carriages traveled through the park while riders moved along designated roads. Boats appeared on the water, and elegant stone structures emerged among the greenery. Bethesda Terrace and its grand stairways gradually became architectural landmarks. Beyond the trees, Manhattan continued expanding, with rows of buildings slowly rising around the park. By the late 19th century, the park had matured into a remarkable green refuge, surrounded by a rapidly growing city. Massive trees formed dense canopies over lawns and pathways, while crowds gathered beside the lake and rowboats moved across the water. Horse carriages continued along the park roads, and Bethesda Terrace became a busy gathering place. Beyond the greenery, Manhattan's buildings grew taller and denser, surrounding Central Park from every direction. The contrast became increasingly dramatic, an enormous, natural-looking landscape at the center of an expanding urban world. Then the 20th century brought a new rhythm. Cars gradually replaced horse-drawn carriages. Electric lights appeared throughout Manhattan, and apartment buildings began climbing higher around the park. The trees continued growing until their enormous branches formed a thick canopy across the landscape. Pedestrians, cyclists, families, performers, and tourists filled the paths. Above the treetops, skyscrapers began appearing one after another, changing the skyline while Central Park itself remained remarkably anchored in place. Through the middle and later decades of the century, the surrounding city became unmistakably modern. Cars, buses, and taxis streamed around the park, while towering apartment buildings and skyscrapers dominated the horizon. Inside the park, runners crossed the paths. Cyclists moved through the crowds. Children gathered on lawns, and boats continued drifting across the lake. The vegetation became dense and mature, while historic bridges, terraces, and stone structures remained almost unchanged. Around them, Manhattan continued rising higher and becoming more crowded. Today, the same landscape is surrounded by one of the most recognizable skylines on Earth. Glass towers stand beside historic skyscrapers, reflecting sunlight above the mature trees. Runners move beneath the canopy. Cyclists travel along the paths. Families gather on the lawns, and visitors photograph the lake and surrounding architecture. Boats glide across the water while the city's constant movement continues beyond the park. Yet beneath the vegetation, the ancient granite still emerges from the ground, quietly connecting the modern landscape to the rugged terrain that existed here centuries ago. From scattered woodland and rocky fields to an immense, living park surrounded by skyscrapers, the transformation has unfolded around the same landscape, turning what was once the quiet outskirts of Manhattan into the green heart of one of the world's greatest cities.